All right, well, welcome everyone to our April business meeting of the Loveland School Board. We will call to order at 6 p.m. We have a roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Mrs. Jaranek.
Here.
Mrs. Mangan.
Here.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here.
All right, thank you. Let's all stand, join together in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, everyone should have received a copy of the board agenda. Any corrections, additions, anything? Then can we have a roll call to approve the agenda? Actually, a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jaranek.
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Thank you. And then minutes are available in board docs. Any additions, corrections to our minutes? Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. I'll second.
A roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
I abstain.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Mrs. Jaranek.
Yes.
Thank you. We did miss you last time.
I know.
Dr. Schwartz.
I missed the best meeting of the year.
I
Yeah.
believe we even invoked the name of Dr. Policy at least once during our meeting. We did. All right. Next, we have the welcoming of guests. I see a couple of our teachers here. I don't know if I don't think we've got any other guests that today. Appreciate you being with us tonight. I assume you're presenting something no.
No.
Just here to, wow, I'm impressed.
They said they were going to sing the national anthem. That's what.
You do get bonus points. Yeah, okay, good. All right, excellent. And I don't believe then we have anyone for the hearing of the public.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move on right into our reports. Anything from our administrator reports that you want to do verbally? All good. All right. So board president, well, I wasn't planning to be there that fast. So Kathy Lorenz shared something with us from Great Oaks again. So a little update on what's been happening there. At the April 10th Great Oaks Board of Directors meeting, it was announced that the 7 of the 17 programs offered on the Live Oaks campus next academic year, only 3 have any spaces remaining. It was also announced that there will be a new program, Aviation Exploration, offered at Live Oaks next year. Brandon Jones, a Loveland student at Scarlet Oaks campus, earned an AWS welding certification. And finally, it was noted that nationwide 2022 statistics show that within 6 months of leaving high school, 94.7% of career technical education students were employed, enrolled in continuing education or an apprenticeship, or enlisted in the military. So it's quite the rate of employment and great things happening there. The Live Oak Senior Ceremony will take place at 4 p.m. on May 16th at Northern Kentucky University Arena. Board members should let Kathy know if they are interested in attending. Also, I'd say that looking forward to, and Mr. Broadwater is going to talk more about this in his report, being in Columbus next week for a conference. Getting to hear more about that coming up. And Communications Committee, I think you guys were going to share a little bit from your meeting.
Yep, Christina's going to do that. Okay. So we met last week and we were discussing a little bit more of what our intentions are with getting communication out to our people of Loveland and our communities. A few things that we kind of grew with themes were the growth of Every Student Matters, and we'll measure that through the growth index on the report card. But we'll communicate with parents, like first-time parents will have sessions and information to share with them about what's to come. Something, for example, would be being more, having things readily available either through the newsletters or on the flyer page that about the EOC testing, what is involved with that, teacher assessments, reading groups and such. But we'll also focus on social and other pathways of exposure for students at younger ages through high school for example, finding your stripes days and just kind of getting awareness of careers and furthering your education. We also talked about how we're going to invite people to come to different events. And one thing that I'll be working on this summer would be reaching out to the different neighborhoods in Loveland, finding who their contacts are for, like, if it's an HOA, finding their main email, joining in on their Facebook page so we can get information to each neighborhood so people are aware of what's going on. We'll also do town halls again in the fall and one in the spring next year, and possible podcasts.
We had some feedback from some younger parents as their first child is going through the district. They just wanted to be more informed about the different, services available. So, and they felt like if they paired with an older parent, that older parent could cascade the information, but they didn't know what to expect at different touch points. So that was a key part of our communication that Christina had.
Great. Excellent. Anything from any of the other committees?
I can just give a brief update on the school foundation. So the school foundation, the Loveland Schools Foundation used to meet quarterly. We've moved that to monthly as we've brought some new board members on. We've retained the majority of existing board members, but we've been moving to monthly so that we can just get more of a rhythm. So we're working on updating our articles of incorporation. We have online giving set up, which we talked about before. We had a former alumni create a logo for us, Ben Hoffman, Mr. Hoffman's at the middle school's oldest child. And then we're going to be working on a website as well as just re-looking at our sponsorship levels for both corporate sponsors as well as membership fees, but really want to get more intentional about the scholarship funding, the staff grant funding, as well as, other ways we can assist. So we're getting that foundation kind of squared away in terms of website giving and all those pieces, and we'll start communicating more probably mid-summer as we get the website and things up to date, but it's moving along nicely.
Thanks for your work on that and for everyone else that's serving on the board and helping us to continue that good work begun a long time ago in the foundation. All right. Anything else from any other committees?
Yeah, we're just with the Student Education Experience Committee. We're just working to recruit students to continue coming to board meetings and sharing what's going on in the schools. So we are working on a few applications that have come in and touching base with those students. And of course, you two will continue with what you're doing. So.
Excellent. That's it. Then that's a great segue into our student representative reports.
Sorry about that. So state testing season is now in full swing, as I'm sure all of you guys know, especially our teachers here. So all three third graders and fourth graders will test this year in reading and math. This is an Ohio statewide thing. Building leadership teams at all three schools have started planning for the next school year by helping parents and students alike with the transition from one school to the next. Next, I have staff and student accomplishments. April 9th was our final peaceful school bus meeting for students to get them home safely and calmly, especially as the school year wraps up. As weather gets nice, everyone gets a little anxious. So definitely important to do that. The Teacher Parent Association continues to plan field trips for our students next school year. First graders will go to Parkey's Farm. Second graders will go to the zoo. Third graders to Sharon Woods. And fourth graders to Fort Ancient. Students pre-K through 4 raised over $2,000 in our annual coin drive to donate to the Nest Foundation for the purchase of books. And the book fair raised $25,000, and a percentage of that returns to the media center. Next, we have a professional development update. Pre-K through 4 students will participate in tornado drills during the months of April and May, which is required by the state. And finally, we have some important dates, as the 6th through the 9th of May are Teacher Appreciation Week. So thank you to all the teachers out there. 5/20 is the LECC Step Up to LPS Day, where our students will visit the new schools and kind of get a feel for how things work. And then the 23rd is our final day, so we're getting close. We're almost there. And then lastly, like to give an update on the Tiger Council. So this past week, we wrapped up the school year with our Tiger Council, our last meeting. And at the meeting, we took some time to reflect on the progress that we've made as a group. And so a list of our accomplishments are as follows. We united all of our Hope Squads, the middle school and the high school, to work with mental coach Brandon Seho to help them hone their skills and get ready for the transition to high school. We worked with Tigers Incorporated to help with Finder Stripes Day, which I can testify was a great success. We talked to the Loveland Police Chief and a civil engineer to help with the traffic situation at the high school. We are actually putting in a new stoplight coming with the 24 school year. And we found a date for the seniors to parade through the younger schools, if you will, as a way to celebrate, see their old teachers, which I think is a great idea. And I'd like to give a thank you to Mr. Broadwater and Mr. Setters. They have done a great job with us this year, kind of bringing students together so they can meet with administrators. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. So as CJ kind of already touched on earlier, the high school is also powering through our EOCs, which is kind of nice for people who are in AP classes because we have our time to do our exam reviews, which are really fun, honestly. Like if you go, you kind of are like refreshed and you get to hang out with your friends and like remember the stuff in your class you learned a while ago for the test. April can be a little stressful, but the high school has done a really good job of keeping up the positive energy. I just like think the vibes are like really good and our teachers are doing a good job of like keeping the windows open and making sure everyone is just like feeling good. The high school drama department worked really hard and did an amazing job on their performance of Puffs. So a huge thank you to all of the actors, crew, and directors that poured their valuable time into such a wonderful performance. Celebrate Excellence will be celebrated at the high school next Tuesday to honor our students that have GPAs of 3.5 and above. Students will be enjoying fun games, snacks, and of course receive their academic awards. Congratulations to all of the students receiving an award, and thank you to our counselors and staff for making that possible. On a bittersweet note, our last Tiger Council meeting occurred and we talked about like the pathways our seniors are taking. And it was just really interesting to watch like everyone growing up and like going to different colleges and going into different career fields. It was just really interesting. And we helped Mr. Broadwater with his speech for graduation. And we also talked about the future of our group and how it will move forward. So we're really excited for next year, even though we're gonna miss everybody this year. And on the note of moving forward, my internship has been incredibly rewarding and enjoyable. I really like working with members of the administrative offices and being able to submit ideas wherever I like think of them is pretty fun. Like I have a million ideas and go to Mr. Broadwater, Mr. Setters, and now Mr. Samuels pretty much every week. So my apologies. I am currently hoping to run a career day at Loveland High School, and I'm actively working with Link Crew to make the middle school to high school transition just a little bit better and more fun. So thank you.
Thank
I
you.
will- I will just add that you can see how awesome our kids are. The Tiger Council is kind of an accident that worked out to be awesome, being able to get to know the kids and our kids definitely have a lot of energy. It's awesome having Ellie in the office, keeping us on our toes. She can see just how hard we work at all times. And, but it's just been great, and it's always good to have relationships with our kids so that you see why we're doing what we do. But CJ and Ellie and Aaron have been awesome, the whole Tiger Council. And yes, they did help with it might be my whole graduation speech. I might have you give it. But thank you guys.
Right. Yes, thanks again to both of you. It's been great working with you this year, and we look forward to working with you again next year. All right. Then we'll move on then to, I believe, the superintendent updates.
Thank you. I was just going to take a couple of minutes to update the board on the State School Funding Committee that the board asked us to put together. We had a meeting last Wednesday evening. Ms. Spangen was there, and I'll ask for any input that she has. I'm just going to give you kind of a rough draft of what we talked about. So the School Funding Committee, the next slide there, Adam, we discussed what our plan would be. It was really to find a shared goal, to define problems and solutions and build a plan to advocate for solutions specific to Loveland. When it comes to finance, we feel like we're relying heavily on our residents because the state share maybe is not what we feel it could be, but finding a way that we can get our point across from Loveland's point of view and what our thoughts are with maybe how we can help our community out a little bit as we go through. The next slide, we have an updated goal statement after getting input from the committee. The Loveland City School District State School Funding Committee advocates for additional state funding from Ohio lawmakers for Loveland and other similar school districts. There are some school districts that are very similar to us to ensure our students have access to high quality public education with less dependence on property tax levies. The next slide, kind of giving the information out. When it comes to expenditures, I think it's important that our community knows we're being fiscally responsible in what we do. So I threw out some data points just as an example. Our expenditures per pupil are 375 out of 606 school districts. So 61% of Ohio districts spend more per pupil than we do. So that would mean we're in the lower 39%. Revenue per pupil, we are 490th out of 606 districts. So 81% of Ohio school districts receive more funding per pupil, so per student. I would point out the first one is expenditures, we're at the 61%. Second, at revenue, we're at 81%. I think that should show you that we put a lot of our money into the classroom. That's where a lot of the finances are going, is directly into the classroom, and that's why the expenditures are ranked a little bit higher than the revenues. Always get the question about administrators, so I've got that as a point. Administrator expenditures per pupil, we are 454th out of 607, so 75% of the districts in Ohio spend more per student on administrators than Loveland as a data point. And then teachers per pupil, we are 14th out of 608. So 98% of Ohio districts have more teacher support per pupil than we do. I would point out, I've got it in parentheses there, we are grade banded, which helps us considerably, which means all of our third graders are in the same building, all of our fourth graders are in the same building. So it's a little bit easier when it comes to staff and being able to identify appropriate class sizes. We feel that we do have appropriate class sizes. I'm not sure that a lot of the Loveland residents know that we are in the bottom 2% when it comes to this data point. So I think it's good for people to understand in the community where we are for expenditures, and then how were we different with the next slide was we would say we're not receiving enough state money. We receive about we're pretty precise there, $4,066.28 per student. We are 508th out of 606, so 17% of the Ohio districts receive less state funding than Loveland. And then the amount of residential property, Loveland has 90% of real estate value in residential, therefore the flip side of that is we don't have a whole lot of business, right? We are pretty much a bedroom community, which is a benefit to living there, but it also relies heavily on residential property. We rank 553rd out of 606 districts, so 9% of Ohio districts have the same or less when it comes to residential property. To me, when you start getting into single digits with percentage, that's a little bit of an anomaly. And so we are ranked fairly low when it comes to business, and so we are leaning on our residents quite a bit. The next slide that we showed the committee, the local tax effort, it's on CUP report line 39 for the committee. We did share the CUP report with the committee. We asked them to take a look at it and review it and come with any questions. The local tax effort is a state of Ohio measure that reflects the extent of the effort residents make in supporting public education. This index is calculated using local property values and local income to determine the residents' ability to support public education. So I would caution that this is it's a state funding measure. But that's what they use for the local tax effort and to figure out what districts are going to receive in terms of state funding. The Loveland local tax effort is 52.72%. That ranks as 587th out of 606, which means 97% of the districts in Ohio have more of a local tax effort than Loveland. And that jumps out at you. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what the state is using for their calculations. The part of the tax effort that they use, the Ohio median income is 61.9, which puts us in the top 95% of all the districts. The federal average income is around 148,000. Again, that puts us in the top 95% of districts in Ohio. So kind of the message there is, in comparison to the other districts in the state of Ohio, the state of Ohio sees us as a wealthy district, which means they're going to lean on the residents, which means residents are being asked to pay more. And so therein lies the issue with Loveland. It makes us a little bit of an anomaly is the amount we use the residential property tax is pretty tough. The next slide, what you have for the fair school funding, and I am no means am I going to be able to define it. And Mr. Espy, if you want to jump in anytime, let me know. But the fair school funding, there's two ways to receive state funding. There is the formula. On the formula, they will say that the cost to educate a child is around $8,900. Based on all of their formulas, they will say that the Loveland City School District should get 10% of that, which would be about $899 per student, which there is no way in the world we can run a school district only getting $900 per student from the state of Ohio. So in the fair school funding, which for Loveland is not necessarily fair, they also threw out the other part is the guarantee. And the guarantee is the value that I gave you early, which is the $4,066.28 that we receive per student. So because the fair school funding model does not fund us appropriately, what they came up with was guarantee districts where they're probably majority of them are wealthy districts that they don't fit into the formula, so they guarantee a certain amount of money. And that's from a high level. John, I don't know if you want to throw anything else in there.
I actually found a district that is economic disadvantage that's on the guarantee. So there,
Really?
it's super weird in terms of how it works. But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Essentially, what this is a formula was put in place. The formula doesn't really work for us. And so the state, recognizing that issue, and at the time when they recognized the issue, it was 1/3 of the districts in the state we're going to be funded less through this funding formula. And so thus the guarantee has been created. However, the guarantee is not necessarily guaranteed. It's a guarantee that has to be renewed with every biennium budget. So this is a component of our funding that's really, really important to us. And there's actually more information. I don't know if you're going to get to it, but we fall into one of 55 districts that is on the guarantee, but also not on the funding floor. So that's
the next slide, Adam, if you want to throw it up. You want to go through it, John? You can.
Yeah, so there are 611 school districts. There are now 80.36% of them on the funding floor, which essentially means at that point, the districts would start to get increases based off property value increases. There are 181 districts on the guarantee, so that's 29.62%, and then 55 that fall into the guarantee and the funding floor for 9%. I'm still trying to gather a little bit more information because some of those districts that are on the guarantee and not on the funding floor have school district income taxes. So we would want to pull those out. However, I believe that's only going to be 3 or 4 after going over it recently. So
good. The next slide is kind of the key takeaways where we're at right now with the committee. We've got one more meeting scheduled in May. The biggest thing that John and I would recommend to the committee is we need to protect that guarantee. If that guarantee, every biennium budget, they could pull that guarantee. If they do, Loveland's got a huge problem. And so we need to make sure that we protect the guarantee. That would be the number one when we go to talk to state legislators. Make sure we keep the guarantee, because what John had just reviewed, there are not a whole lot of districts that do not have an inflationary adjustment in some part of their revenue. We would ask that we could get an inflationary adjustment. It'd be great if it was the same as a consumer price index, but 3.5% is what it was in March. But some sort of inflationary adjustment would be helpful for the Loveland residents, because right now revenue is flat other than a little bit of inside millage, which doesn't amount to much. And I think that's the hard part about state finance, state funding in Ohio, is you kind of have to unlearn what you think common sense is. Common sense would tell you if my appraisal went up, my taxes are going up, my school district's getting more money. In the state of Ohio, that's not true. And so we are one of a few districts that do not have any inflationary adjustment in our formula. So we would love to see an inflationary adjustment to the guarantee. And there's some other things that we've discussed in terms of the residential versus business, the median. Loveland, I think, when you look at the federal average income, where Loveland is as a community, I think the median is probably a better indication of where we are wealth, which means you have some residents with a lot of wealth, some residents not. So the median is where we should be, versus the average income can be skewed a little bit depending on those numbers. So some other key takeaways when we get to the committee in May, we're going to try and nail down where we're going. And then the last thing I've got for the next meeting, we want to kind of land on where we're going to move towards action. President Eilert had mentioned next week, April 23rd, we'll be up in Columbus, BASA, which is the State Superintendent Association. In the morning, we are going to have a meeting with district leaders, and I believe Ms. Mangan, Reverend Eilert, Mr. SB, and myself are going up. But we'll take a look at what they have to say. And in the afternoon, we are going to meet with Senator Blessing. Right now, I believe we have the meeting scheduled so we can at least get our foot in the door initially with Senator Blessing and discuss kind of our concerns. And then the other part, making sure we're letting our community know how this works. We've discussed today in our leadership team meeting some of the ways we could do that, with John presenting to our community in terms of what this means, but also in our newsletter. I think we had about 7,000 people that are subscribed to the community newsletter, making sure we continue to get the word out. And who do we know? Loveland, when you look at Loveland City School District, sometimes we just live in our bubble here, but when I go to Columbus, I can tell you Loveland City School District is known in Columbus. We are a very high-performing school district. They respect what we do. They know that we are moving into being a wealthy district. And some of the discussions I had with legislators, I think we had them in 2 years ago, they understood what the issue was. They didn't have many good answers, so we're going to try and take some answers, or at least some ideas to them about how maybe we can help each other out. And then from there, once we come back to the May committee meeting, we've got a gentleman speaking from Ohio School Board Association, William Schwartz, who is their legislative liaison. He's got a lot of connections in terms of legislators, so he is going to present. We'll see if that's the last meeting and we wrap it up and we get our plan as far as how we're going to talk to legislators, who we're going to talk to. It's kind of in the air, but a little bit of a plan, but just making sure that we're flexible enough to do what we think we need to do. So with that, I don't know, Lynn or Jonathan, if
I'm happy
anybody.
Yeah, so just, I think it's been very good for the community members that are participating to understand the two types of state funding. There's the guarantee, which we're thankful to have the guarantee, and then there's the fair school funding. And the fair school funding, as the state continues to fund that plan, they're if somebody's on the formula, they should be going up. We did talk about that is at risk with voucher funding, with the Ed Choice expansion, that there is great concern for the districts that are on the formula, that because of the significant increase in funding for vouchers that could take away from the formula districts going up. And looking at Loveland, the Ed Choice expansion, there's about, I think there was 18 or 20 students that were renewals that were using it before, but with it going way, anybody can apply for a voucher. And we've seen where, private schools are really encouraging every student to apply. We know that there's 600 students in Loveland that have, in our district that have applied, but we're not seeing any significant changes to our enrollment. So it's, it's people that were already in public schools, but at the minimum, in private schools, but at the minimum, that's probably about $600,000 that, there's not an unlimited budget, but for Loveland, it's probably about $600,000 at a minimum that has gone for Ed Choice expansion. Because we're on the guarantee, it's not taking funds away from us, but there's a limited, everybody has a limited budget. So it's very concerning for formula districts. And we wanted to make sure the committee understood that. But the headline on state funding is there's two ways to get state funding. One has an adjustment and is going up over time. The guarantee does not. And then for local funding, you can have, we all have inside millage. Our inside millage this past year, that caused our funding to go up 1.7%, which is not a significant number. But unless you're at the floor or unless you're getting an income tax, there's no inflationary adjustment other than that inside millage. So we, from both a local funding perspective and a state funding perspective, are in the bucket where the only inflationary adjustment we're getting is that inside millage. So it's a kind of a double whammy. So we wanted to zoom in, and that's how we got to those 55 districts that are impacted. And we want to just, it's so complex. And we want to simplify it as much as possible so people understand. And also when we go to legislators, if we know the, 50 to 55 schools impacted, we can share what that means to the state budget overall, not just for our district. So that's how we're hoping to help with that lever. It's, but it's complex, and whether we're going to do our best to try and move the needle. But it's, it takes lots of steps to get us there. So
Even the 1.7 is an anomaly because we had
Right.
such large increases. It's normally not even that much
right,
that would go up because of the inside millage.
yeah,
I think the other thing that's important to note in terms of thinking about why it's important to talk about an inflationary increase on the guarantee is based upon 2018,
Yes.
correct numbers? 17.
17-18 school year, so fiscal year 18.
So that's how long that number has been static and with no plan to increase it. So at some point, you would think there needs to be some kind of an increase to maintain some level of fairness there. So that's what we'll certainly be advocating for, and encourage everyone to advocate for such things with our legislature.
yeah. And I would just continue to encourage folks that if there's people in the community that aren't on the committee that are interested in learning more, I think, we are going to need, as Mike said, who do you know, the more people we can have helping with this, the better. So.
Any other questions for Mr. Broadwater? Anything else in your report? I'm sorry.
I got one good thing on here, a positive thing. Not that wasn't positive, but I want to announce Gretchen Watts, a special education teacher at our intermediate school, she's going to attend Hamilton County Education Foundation's Celebrate Excellence event in May, where she'll be recognized along with outstanding teachers from across the area. If you know Gretchen, you know she does a fantastic job with our students. She also has experience in the classroom. She was a building coordinator. She was an assistant principal. Wanted to get back into the classroom, which tells you how much she likes kids. And so she is a fantastic teacher. Our staff does such a great job, and I'm going to be excited to recognize Gretchen, and it'll be a nice ceremony at Hamilton County ESC, and she'll be there with her family. So congratulations to Gretchen Watts.
Excellent. Always great to see our educators being rewarded for the good work we know they do every day in our classrooms. All right. Speaking of our educators and caring for them, our human resources report.
Good evening, everybody. Again, Garth Collier from the Human Resources Department. I have a couple of things I want to make sure to discuss with you guys tonight. I want to make sure to point out that there are some items that are in yellow that were added this morning and then yet again this afternoon. It's been a busy time for the Human Resources Office. We have some postings that are up, interview committees at different buildings happening. And as these things pop up, I apologize for it being late. We want to make sure to get these on the board agenda when we had a meeting tonight. So please make sure before ask any questions, especially about anything in yellow. A couple of things that I want to make sure to point out other than that are that in section B, you will notice that we have 4 certified folks that are on the agenda tonight. And I want to make sure to point out that B1, B2, and B3, those are all current employees that we have this year, 2 of them of which are currently teachers, but they were on contracts that were only good for 1 year. And we are now able to offer them a regular contract, which is really great. B2, Hannah Scherpenberg, she actually happens to be sitting in here tonight. Hi, Hannah. She currently works at our high school as an aide, and she's actually going to be in a teaching position for next year. So that's going to be something that you guys can be voting on. So congratulations, Hannah. And we really appreciate the work that you have done and are looking forward to the work that you will be doing with our high school kids.
Hey, Garth, 1 second. Hannah, you missed before. There were congratulations for the great production of Puffs, by the way. So thank you for your leadership there as well. You walked in right after that.
So, and then the 4th person on this list here, we have a couple of different kindergarten positions that are open at LECC. This is just one. There are going to be some more recommendations coming our way. And that is someone who is going to be brand new to us. They are finishing up their student teaching now, and I was able to meet with her. The recommendation came, and I was able to meet with her actually this afternoon. Right before I came up here. So right before I updated the agenda. So section D has yellow highlights as well. That is for the Mr. Fancher at the primary school, their Jumpstart program. And if you guys recall, when Mr. Fancher has spoken about it, and I believe probably even Mr. Coles and maybe even Dr. Porta, talking about that reading loss over the summer and trying to make sure to minimize that, this Jumpstart program are for make sure that we're getting with our kids and right before we're getting them back to school so we can try to reduce that summer slide for reading. And then the only other thing I want to make sure to point out is that our administrator contracts in April is when we like to bring those to the board. You will see that there are administrators listed here. That is not all of the administrators. If you recall at a couple of our past meetings, we have some administrators switching positions. So their contracts have already been board approved. For example, Mr. Bryant moving into Mr. Ames's position, Mr. Bruce moving into Mr. Bryant's position, so on and so forth. So I would be able to field any questions that you guys have.
Can you say just briefly, because Christina's new to this, Lynn's already heard the explanation, and the rest of us were on the board when we made the switch to the 2-year contracts or went back to, sorry.
Yeah.
We returned to
So,
the
yeah,
contracts.
that's a good point. I'd be glad to speak about it. So in terms of contracts, if you kind of think of some buckets, we have, and in schools, you kind of have, let's take teachers, for example. They could be on a 1-year contract or a multi-year contract or even a continuing contract. With administrators, we have historically been offering 2 and maybe in some cases a 3-year contract. And all of the folks that you see here, these are all folks who were on the agenda this past year for a 2-year contract. What we want to make sure to do is, just like our teaching staff, we really want to make sure that we retain our own folks. And we kind of pride ourselves in that we want to do everything we can to make sure that this is a good place for people to work because they produce and do really great things for kids. So what this is that it makes it to where the administrators aren't working on their final year of their contract, which gives them just a little bit of a basically it just means that they know that every other year they're not up for, am I going to be able to continue to work at Loveland? So this is a practice that had been in play, and then we didn't do that any longer. And now for the past couple of years, it's back in play.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, ready for a motion?
Yep.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a roll call, please?
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Thank you.
One quick note, it didn't have anything to do with the pieces on the agenda. But I know that we already did recognize that we had some teachers that are here. I do want to make sure to say that Mike mentioned it in his board update with the kind of the funding pieces about being grade banded, is that that's a way for us, it's a much easier setup for us to make sure that we kind of have fine-tuned staffing for our district. That's not always the case. For example, there was a couple of times at which here historically in Loveland, people really love the building that they work in and they become friends with other staff members and they are really kind of honed in at their subject or the age level at which they teach. Through some reallocations, there were a couple of times this year where I've had to have conversations with staff members that are going to have to move to a different building. And I just want to say, from my perspective, and I know I'm speaking for Mike with this, but that has been nothing but professional conversations. People have handled that situation, those situations really well. It's not easy, right? Because these aren't things that people are like really excited to do when they're really invested in the building that they're currently in. But just a shout out to our LEA and to our staff for keeping those conversations professional and them understanding that this whole idea with funding, we're always trying to make sure put people in places to get the best things done. So that's all. Thank you.
Excellent.
If
you
anyone
very
needs help moving their classroom, I'm happy to help.
Sounds great.
It's a
Thank
lot of
you.
work.
No, we appreciate you guys' support.
And also, it's a good time to say thank you to all of our administrators as we renew contracts for them. And hope they know how valuable their work is to the board and how much we appreciate the fact that you guys go the extra mile every day to make sure that we maintain excellence here at Loveland. So thank you for the great work that you do. All right. Move on to the business manager. Speaking of one of those administrators, although one whose contract we are not renewing.
Items on the agenda tonight. One is for the approval of the must have turned me on. One is for the approval of the HVA controls for the middle and intermediate school. And I would like to thank the board for letting us move forward on this project. This is the end of the controls replacements for the entire district. It's gone on for 3 years now. It will carry the district through at least the next 10 years, if not further on. So I do appreciate that. And it will take probably 6 to 8 months to get this building done, but it will be ready to go by next summer, hopefully. The second item is to reject any and all bids regarding an HVAC units, rooftop units for the middle school. And when we bid this project, it is for the auditorium in the middle school. And any of you who have been in the middle school auditorium, when they are having plays and that unit turns on, you can't hear your children talk. So the most important thing was that we got very quiet units. And when we bid it, we put it out for 4 different kinds of units. And we also said this is the sound decibel levels that these units can put out, but we failed to say, and this is the specific decibel that we wanted. So we had a few different people bid different things. So we're going to just rebid it, making sure we get the quietest unit that is out there. It will go out for rebid starting tomorrow, and I will bring it back to you for the May meeting. It's not a big issue as far as timing because these units are 16-week delivery. So it was going to be next fall anyway, so it'll just push it off by another 4 weeks. The very good thing about these units are they are going to be, I'll use the term DX chillers, DX cooling, which means they can have air conditioning during the wintertime. Historically, we have not had air conditioning during the winter because we had to have the cooling tower running. It couldn't run when it was freezing outside. So this, when you have those hot, muggy plays or concerts around Christmas or whatever, we'll still be able to keep it cool. And then the final one is to approve carpeting for the Board of Education offices, for the Elementary Media Center, and also room 209, tile for room 209 in the elementary school. This is the final office of the district that is getting new carpeting. We've done all of the other schools, so it's now us. It is very expensive because there's 9,500 and some square feet of carpet in there that also you have to move all the furnishings, put all new base around the whole thing. So it's a rather expensive proposition. So we'd like to get that done this summer and then move on to the next year's issues.
And didn't we say that's like, that carpet's been in place since early 2000?
It was
So-
here, when this building was built, it was installed in 2000.
Yeah.
So it's done its time.
Yeah.
And when it gets wet, it really gets nasty.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you.
Also say that the carpeting, right, is being purchased through essentially a consortium.
Yes.
So therefore it does not have the same bidding process because that bidding's been done.
Yes, thank
For
you.
the-
The Department of Administrative Services, State of Ohio, has pre-bid the carpet, so it is all pre-done, so we did not have to go out for public bidding.
Great. Any other questions? All right, well, the first item then we have is to approve the bid for the HVAC controls and bipolar ionization units in the amount of $893,000. Motion,
So moved. Second?
roll call, please.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes?
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Thank you. Then the second one is to approve the purchase and installation of the carpet for $71,790, $19,465, and $5,490. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
A roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Thank you. You'll note I didn't try to do the math on the fly to add those all
Yeah.
together. Then finally, the motion to approve a resolution rejecting any and all bids for the Loveland Middle School HVAC HAU replacement project.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Just a reminder, once again, if someone's just tuning in, that's simply so that it can go back out to bid with one more specification relative to the decibel level necessary for the place of the installation. All right, moving on to treasurer report.
Thank you, President Eilert, members of the board. I'd like to first talk about some March monthly analysis. We are now 75% through fiscal year 24 or 9 months. Expenditures and revenues are showing a positive cash impact on the cash balance equal to 1.3% of our total forecasted expenditures. When we look and do a deep dive on the expenditure, salaries and benefits, as well as purchase services, are still below the forecasted amount as I had brought to you last month in the analysis. And again, this is going to allow previously ESSER funded positions to be included in the forecast without major changes to the bottom line, which we're happy about. When we look at revenues, state aid in general is trending slightly less than expectations. However, there is a variance that we think will get a little bit closer as we get towards the end of the fiscal year. All other items are very close to the forecasted amount. And just to point out a little bit of a timing change, Claremont County tax settlement last year was in March. We're expecting it to be in April. I was told that I would have an update by Friday on when we can expect those. When we look at interest income, month to date is $68,712.92 for fiscal year to date total of $726,045.47. Are there any questions on that? As we look forward at the next item, and this is actually in the reports that are attached, but this is our new Red Tree Board report that breaks down all of the interest and investment income that the district has had, as well as some benchmarking. So we're happy to bring this in, and this will be a monthly report that I provide to the board. And I wanted to take a moment. I know there's been some confusion and maybe some questions on the recent agreement to purchase land. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the funding source of where that land is going to be purchased from, and that's the Permanent Improvement Fund. So the Permanent Improvement Fund essentially exists for capital improvement projects, and they typically are required to last 5 years or more or be maintenance driven. And then these funds can purchase technology, heating and air conditioning systems, roof, and then you obviously see land acquisition that I have highlighted. Curriculum items that are adopted that are over 5 years can also be utilized out of this fund too, although we're not really utilizing that fund that way currently. This appears in our accounting ledger as Fund 003, and this is not part of the 5-year forecast, and therefore it's not part of the operating fund. So, when the district had done previous forecasts and gone on the ballot for levies, this was not factored in because this is not part of the general fund that the forecast is done on. So I think that that's really important that the community understand that. And then going forward, I know this is small, but again, I'll make sure this is linked to the board report. Essentially, when we look at the projected debt service on this land purchase, and in context of the PI fund, we're talking about slightly over 5% each year of the revenue that we would be getting into the PI fund. So, we are talking about 5.21% that you'll see later in fiscal year 34, but it is definitely a small portion of our projected debt service. Any other questions?
It's not a question. I just think it's worth noting that, we did have some other things financed in the PI fund that are rolling off.
Yes, there are some items that are coming off, as well as, we've actually taken a lot of time. Mr. Ames and myself, as well as other departments, have taken a lot of time to really build out a capital expenditure plan that's 10 years and beyond in some cases. So we have a really good understanding of how we're going to utilize these funds and a plan going forward. It's not to say that that plan can't change, but it's a really good roadmap for the district with some of these larger expenditures that are funded through the Permanent Improvement Fund. I also wanted to recognize the Treasurer's Office staff, because a lot of this information that I present to you it's the culmination of a lot of people's work. So I want to give them a shout out as well.
Are you now fully staffed in the treasurer's office?
We are.
Excellent.
We are.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Esp? We have a motion to accept the financial reports for March 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick.
Yes.
Okay, moving on into item 2, it's amended permanent appropriations. And I know that sounds a little weird, but that's just the terminology that the county auditor and the state gives are essentially our budget. So this is a culmination of the thousands of budget lines that we have, and they are totaled at the fund level. As I told you last month, I'm going to be bringing this monthly unless there's no change, and really there's hardly ever a month where there's no change in a budget line, whether we're moving it from one to another. So this is just I just said a lot of words to just basically sum up that this is a procedural item that I'll bring you every month.
Any questions on that very clear explanation? All right, do we have a motion to approve the fiscal 24 amended permanent appropriations?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
All right, getting into item 3 here, this is the opposite side. So this is the revenue. So we have several hundred revenue lines, and they all are now summed up in a fund, and it looks at the beginning cash balance, what we plan to bring in, and then what the end is. So when I'm looking at the appropriations have to fit within the certificate. And again, this is just procedural.
Anything surprising you so far as you've looked at both of these numbers since you've begun with us in terms of flow and how things are?
No, we've been setting up reports in the treasurer's office for all of the different departments and buildings, and I have reports that come to me daily. And so I utilize a report that kind of takes both of these last 2 reports and puts them together just to make sure we're in compliance. So, it's just keeping up with it. I look at it every day. It's the first thing that I look at, and sometimes I'm still awake when it comes at 11:50 at night. So,
All right, any other questions? Motion, please.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
roll call, please.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Thank you. Approval of the resolution to approve the 24 amended certificate. All right, now to the contracts for approval.
Yeah, we just have one contract to bring to you tonight, and that's because it's a 3-year, it's a multi-year contract. So we'll bring that to you for board approval. And it's, we were able to just lock in lower pricing, and thanks to Adam for doing all that work.
Any questions on the Seesaw contract?
John, is this something that we've been using throughout, or is this a new product in the school?
I can attest that it's something we've been using because I see updates and videos and messages from my kids on it. So
And then as something that's a 3-year contract, is that able to be run through the PI fund, or is that in our operating budget?
it'll be in the operating budget. It would not be in PI since it would be less than 5 years.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve the contract as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
6.5 is a depository agreement. We typically do these every 5 years, and this is to continue on with our relationship with LCNB.
Any questions? We have a motion to approve the depository agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
6.6 is the acceptance of rates. This is provided to us by Hamilton County, and is essentially the rates for calendar year 2025 is determined by the Budget Commission.
We don't even get, there's nothing we can debate about this, right? We're just essentially receiving this, correct?
Yeah, there's really no debate. This is just procedural again.
John, can I just ask a question for my simple brain? And I've always thought of a mill in Loveland being roughly $1 million. Has that changed? I just see the PI is tax levy 5, which I assume is 5 mills.
Yeah,
And then it's bringing in 3,799,000.
so it has gone up. I can provide that exact number to you next month when I go over the 5-year forecast. But yeah, when the valuation goes up, a mill is essentially, it creates more revenue.
But that number seems to me to be the reverse, only because 3.8 million is equivalent to 5 mills. And maybe I'm just wrong. In my mind, in the past, the mill's been about $1 million.
Right. This is,
Or is this a different way to measure it?
it's a different way to measure it. If you're looking at, are you looking at,
I'm looking
Looking
at the
at PI
Hamilton
fund.
County Auditor dated March 29th.
yeah, so the PI, it does not have the kind of the rollback or the, not rollback's actually a bad word. That's a whole different thing. It does not have the reduction of effect that
Gotcha.
a operating mill would.
right. Any other questions? Then do we have a motion to approve the tax rates as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mengan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchinow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick.
Yes.
6.7 is, again, procedural. These are payment in lieu of transportation students. There's a process that parents will go through to apply for this. And this is just the board approval that is essentially allowing us to pay these individuals, families, once we've verified that they've attended the school for the entire year. And that payment would happen in June.
The amount's not changing from last year.
The amount does change. It's actually a state set amount. Typically goes up a few percentage points.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve the resolution for transportation deemed to be impractical and approve the list of recommended schools and students.
So moved.
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchinow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mengan.
Yes.
6.8, and thank you for sticking with me this long. My section's not normally this long. Approval of donations. So this is Lemons and Limes donated a value of $1,246, 35 shirts and 7 sweatshirts to LCS, as well as $1,000 from Art Jarvis to LHS Esports. And we want to thank those individuals and, Lemons and Limes for all of their support.
Yeah, both the Jarvises and the Lemons and Limes, the Knights are very generous to them. Very appreciated.
Would you like to make a motion to
Sure.
approve those?
So, yep, so moved.
Second.
Excellent. May I roll call, please?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick.
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
and Dr. Swetchinow.
Yes.
So I just have one more thing that I wanted to say. Very happy to be, I'm heading to my professional conference with OASBO tomorrow and representing the district and presenting 3 times over the next 2 days. So it's going to be a little bit of more of a working conference for me, but it's going to be good to connect with some of my colleagues and learn from one another. And, that's really what it's all about, I think, is the networking and understanding how we can help solve problems together, especially when we're looking at what we're looking at with the school funding committee. And I'm excited to do that and represent the district.
Thank you. We are thrilled to have you representing us as our permanent treasurer here at Loveland, and glad that we're moving along so well, and all the things you've already done to shore up some of our systems and acquire great staff. And so we're grateful to have you on board and doing great work. All right, now that your report is concluded, I turn it right back over to you for a resolution authorizing real estate acquisition.
Yes. So what this resolution is it's essentially allowing us to borrow using a tax anticipatory note up to 1.6 million. It doesn't say we're going to borrow 1.6 million. It essentially just creates an upper threshold as we kind of look to see what that closing amount would be, as well as the cost of issuance.
Great. That makes sense to everyone. So this is kind of a procedural thing. We're going to go into executive session following this to talk more about finalization of that purchase agreement. But this is simply to get us to the place where we would be able to borrow when we're able to finalize all the details. All right. Do we have a motion then to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchinow,
Yes.
and Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Flip through all of those pages then to get past that agreement. to number 7.2. And this is the motion to go into executive session. So I move that the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of considering the purchase of property for school district purposes. Since disclosure at this time would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage to persons whose personal private interests are adverse to the general public interest. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchinow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler.
Yes.
And at 7:05.
Right. 7:05, we will go into executive session. We'll pause the recording now. Once we complete the executive session, we'll come back to adjourn the meeting. We're not anticipating any actual action out of this executive session for tonight, but we'll continue our discussion about the purchase agreement and hopefully make some progress in terms of all of our understanding of where we are relative to being able to execute that. All right, thank you. All right, we are reconvening, coming out of executive session at 7:44. There are no necessary actions coming out of our executive session, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
And second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Meeting adjourned at 7:44.
Thank you.